She is the co-host of the Spinsters podcast. We now welcome Haley O'Shaughnessy onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Haley?
It's going great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on to the show. And first of all, we love talking to Jordan earlier this year, and big fans of your podcast. I think it's so different than all the other kind of NBA podcasts out there. So I think it's great NBA content for everybody to check out. So one of the things I was prepping for this interview, and I think a lot of guests we have on the show, we like to get where their basketball fandom comes from. So the first question I got for you is, what is your favorite basketball memory or your first basketball memory that comes to mind?
Oh, that is tough. The first one that comes to mind is, I don't know how old I was, but my whole family are Louisville fans. And probably the very first is like old. Well, you have like young memories and then you have ones where you can actually remember what's happening. It was like a David Paget steal. So that's very niche Louisville memory, but yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and those were like growing up, those were my primary memories because that was our huge fandom. I wasn't even really an NBA fan until later on. All of them young Louisville, Terrence Williams.
Yeah.
David Paget, Francisco Garcia is one of my favorites.
What shifted? What changed from, being kind of a diehard college basketball fan to, being an NBA fan? The games they're different. It's kind of polarizing. It's kind of either you like the pro game or you like the college. What happened in kind of crossing kind of the boundaries there?
It was Kevin Durant. I was I think I had to have been like 7th or 8th grade when he got drafted. But if you're a college basketball fan, it's just inevitable. Some players are so good, you have to follow them, see what happens with their careers. And I just could not, there was no way I was going to stop watching him. I had no connection to him, obviously, is Texas. And Louisville then didn't really produce a lot of NBA players. So I had never had much of a reason to follow it before. But with Kevin Durant, I was like, okay, I've got to watch him. You start watching the NBA, and I was sold, So it was so much fun in such a different way than college basketball. I still love college basketball, but for different reasons. The NBA is just blew me away.
Any particular, characteristic or thing about Kevin Durant's game that was the main draw?
I've never seen anybody who looks like him do what he does. Ever. And still today, when I see him, I think it's so the length and the skill are both so egregious and don't necessarily fit each other. I've never felt like it made a lot of sense how he plays, how he's able to play. But I just think he's two extremes that don't normally go together in size and makeup, and then also in skill. It's usually you don't find those in one person.
Totally. It's funny. I've had a similar kind of trajectory. I mean, I was a young NBA fan, like the Michael Jordan days and stuff. Justin and I were both very young during the 90s. But I had a similar thing, like following LeBron around, because I remember him being a senior in high school. I think it was our junior year, Justin, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyway, I do remember, following him to different teams. I had kind of that built-in loyalty. Have you had the same sort of thing with Kevin Durant? As he's, there's been a lot of controversy, obviously, around his career and the moves that he's made. Have your feelings kind of stayed the same for him throughout that?
Yeah, because it's just been a baseline admiration, and I've never thought that him leaving those are never turnoffs for me because I don't have team loyalty, so maybe it's a bit different for me. But no, actually, for me, it was LeBron as well, because once you get exposed to the league, you get the bearings of everybody, and I still love watching KD so much, but there was just something about LeBron. He's so magnetic. What he does is so amazing that there's some memories that I'll just never be able to shake how I felt watching him do those things. They're just like core basketball memories for me. So it's actually LeBron for me as well.
Haley, can you kind of go over the origin of the Spinsters podcast? Like, how did you and Jordan like meet? How did the concept of the show, materialize? Because I just love episode by episode. It's, you guys have your banter, and then you'll focus on like a different topic within the NBA. So how did that come about?
Jordan and I met when we were working at The Ringer, and I just thought right away, like, her WNBA stuff was great. She herself was so funny. And so that's where our friendship began. And the Spinsters I had gotten hired by Blue Wire. They said, we want you to do a basketball podcast. And so originally I thought, okay, I'm going to do a weekly podcast. I wasn't sure what, if anything, would be different about it. I knew I wanted a female co-host because, no offense to you guys, you're lovely guys, but sometimes I'm just like, I want to talk basketball with a woman. You know what I mean?
Hey, that's fair.
Yeah. And I don't always get the opportunity to do that, especially in the podcast space. And so I was having my friends do these like fake run throughs, if that makes sense. We get on a Zoom. I'd pretend I was on a podcast, just because I honestly don't have that much experience. You guys have more podcasting experience than I do. And I wanted to make sure I knew how to host, how to, whatever. Jordan was one of my victims, and that she did like a segment with me and was very sweet about it. And I showed it to my boss because I said, I think that like Jordan's really good. And I was thinking maybe we can have her on as a, very recurring contributor, or I wasn't sure what it was, but she had a job. And my boss watched it and he was like, she's the one. Like, you've got to ask her to be your co-host. And so that's how that originated. And I still remember calling her. I was in my mom's front yard because it was like last December. No, it couldn't have been. It was like last January, February. And I was with my mom at the time because of the pandemic. And I told her, hey, do you remember that thing we did? What if you were the full-time co-host? I just like blacked out. And I remember thinking she's going to think that I'm crazy for even asking her this, but she was in. And that's Jordan. Like, if you ask her to do something, she's just down to do it. She's so energetic, and she's like a yes man. And she just did 3x3 for FIBA. She did the announcing. I was talking to her right before it. She's like, yeah, I've never done this before. I never put myself out that way and do like announcing for a tournament. I mean, it was FIBA, but then she killed it. Like, I was streaming it all weekend. She was so good at it. So that's very Jordan. And that's why Spinsters is as good and dynamic as it is. Our conception of it kind of was happening a bit before Jordan, but then also Jordan was inspired a lot of it. And what we wanted to do was something that's more like magazine style, but audio. So like you alluded to, we have every Tuesday, we have a conversational episode. It's me and Jordan talking. And then every Thursday we have either an interview or we have a storytelling episode where we have someone come on. Today, actually, we released one with Natalie Weiner, and she did a story about WNBA players having to play overseas. And the best thing for me is that I get to ask people who I admire or people who are my friends to come do these stories for us, for the show. And then I said me because it feels like I'm being so indulgent on this. I'm like, all of these people I've looked up to for so long, like, are getting to, I'm getting to like pod with them. And Natalie's story today was talking about all of these questions I had. I didn't even know how international teams were able to pay the women more. Like, in my mind, it didn't make sense. It felt like the U.S. was the best basketball country, right? It should surely be able to produce the most money. So she went into that. She went into what's the W doing to stop it? Is it all take and no give? How's this impacting players' health? How's it impacting the product in the W? So right now, this is like us living out our dream. I'm hoping we only get to do crazier stories and more ambitious stuff. And we have a lot of things planned. But yeah, the origins it's wild looking back on it now. We started the show in March because everything I wanted it to be. I have a great co-host. I have Jordan. We have so much fun. I get to interview people, and we also get to do storytelling, which was my favorite part, of being a writer, of course, is doing storytelling. So that's, it's the origin story, but it's also really manifested very well. So I'm really happy right now.
What is your vibe heading into this season in terms of you mentioned starting the podcast in March or with the NBA, we're still dealing with no fans now, we're dealing with a vaccine controversy. Fans are fully back. We have this whole Ben Simmons drama. We have just 6 Hall of Famers on the Lakers. All what's going on with the Nets. What's kind of your vibe going into this season? I've heard kind of both ways. Massive excitement, kind of massive dread in terms of this season, the foregone conclusion. The Nets and the Lakers are going to be in the finals. Kind of where's your vibe heading into the season a couple of weeks away?
I don't think things are so certain. Usually in any other season, let's go pre-pandemic, if these were the rosters and it was just copy and paste and there was nothing else going on, I think, it would be Nets. I'm not so sure about the Lakers. I want to say I am sure about the Lakers, but I'm not, because it's the same, 2 of their best players are still incredibly injury prone, and one of them is a year older. I mean, they're both a year older, but everyone gets a year older. But one of them, it really matters. Of course, Matt, we're not going to talk about it because we love him. But yeah, he's older. And, it's kind of like Chris Paul. I'm just waiting for the year where he really slows down. Chris Paul blew me away this last year. LeBron really has never had that dip, except for recently. I think that the same exhaustion that faced players last year is going to face them this year. I'm not sure actually what the testing protocol is. I'm sure they're still testing even the vaccinated players, but I'm not sure how often. That was a huge thing last year. I don't think a lot of people realize where all the exhaustion came from, but their schedules were condensed so they could finish on time. They were flying all across the country, more erratically than they had before. And they were also having to get up really early to get a COVID test every morning. And so let's say that you get in from, the game is over at 10 and you go back to your hotel room and you get there at 10:30 and then you have to do your stretches or whatever. Maybe that comes before. I've heard stories from players where it's they get back at midnight. The next morning you have to get up and get tested. So I think some of that will still carry over this year. And then the X factor, maybe the X factor is not the right word because it's just the thing that could potentially go wrong instead of potentially going right, is I truly think health, and that includes vaccinated players. And maybe it's not a matter of them being infected or not, but rather them being allowed to play in their arena, in their state or not.
Yeah, I think it's interesting and yet so relatable in ways that we don't often get to relate to these professional athletes, because I think all of us have that sort of COVID fatigue, and that's regardless on everyone's different opinions on things that are going on with this. So it's, to me, interesting to see this play out in an entertainment industry that we're all watching and commenting on. And I think, case in point is NBA Media Day. I think it almost felt to me like this all came to a head where this was kind of the NBA media's chance to comment on some of these things that were going on. And obviously it's a main story. Everyone's concerned about the health and well-being of the league and having a season, et cetera. What were your main takeaways from NBA Media Day and the way that you saw other media members reacting with all of this that's going on?
It's hard. I mean, like you said, we don't always get to see ourselves, or I guess just society at large, reflected so much in the pool of players that the NBA has. I think the same is would be said for media. And the way I was disappointed and encouraged by both groups, by various people in both groups. I think media has a tendency to overstep, but this is an interesting situation because it does affect whether or not a player will be able to play. I think the most upsetting thing for me during media day was, sure, misinformation is getting spread, but the pride with which it was, some of this was being said. I think a bit of it was disrespectful from the media, but also from their challenges, but also from players to everybody, not just NBA personnel and employees, but everybody who has been affected by COVID or lost someone to COVID or has gotten sick by it. There's just, it's a more of a sensitive thing, and I wish it would have been handled a bit more sensitively. It's not just like we're going in and asking the same questions about how's the defense going to get better? This is actually like a serious public health matter. So I was a bit disappointed on both sides, but also encouraged because we had, statements like, I think it was Damian Lillard, right? Who said that he wanted to get vaccinated because he had people in his life that he wanted to protect. He wanted to, I can't remember if he was the one who said something about it being, better for the public. But he certainly had something that I thought was, if you're going to be asked about it, that's the answer I'd like to hear. But, overall, it was just kind of, it took me aback because it's very atypical.
Haley, I want to ask you, are there any players that you're watching this upcoming season that like the mainstream sports media are not paying attention to? Are there anybody on your radar that you're like, man, I can't wait to see them play, that like no one's really focusing on, or you just focus on like kind of the big teams, how Durant and Kyrie, how they're going to mesh? Because really it's just been so weird. They're tenured in Brooklyn so far just due to the pandemic and just Kyrie missing all these games. Or are there any other storylines that you're watching that the typical casual NBA fan might be missing?
Scary Terry, baby. No, but really, I think the Hornets are going to be really fun, and the Grizzlies. I do think that maybe they've transcended last season. They transcended to, even if you just get TNT, ABC, ESPN, I think that those teams have still stood out because they're so fun. Interested to see also, this is funny to pair them together after the playoffs, but I think the Hawks and the Knicks are in sort of the same boat. Are they going to be able to take this momentum and their younger players and move forward and push forward and go further? Or are they going to, either stay the same, which would still be good for both franchises, or are they going to regress? And I am worried that the Knicks are going to regress. I also think that although the Nuggets are a favorite, they're not the favorite, but they are favored to do well. I do think that they will surprise people as well.
They're a weird team. Like every year I feel like I want to pick the Denver Nuggets to go to the NBA Finals, but like I have a sick feeling in my stomach something bad's going to happen like last year.
No, I know, but I think the thing for me that encourages me with them is that I think there are more parallels just in terms of improvement and nothing else between Jokic and Giannis than we realize. Giannis got better every year consistently, and he won the title. I genuinely think, although Jokic is not, you can't maybe physically see the improvements because his body is just not shaped that way. I do think that he's just improved every year I've watched him. If, when Jamal Murray comes back and he's older, I just think it's going to be a really tough combination. That's also, though, they're third best player? I made a joke about this on Twitter and it did not. People were like, Michael Porter Jr. is he's one of their best players. I was just like trying to make a joke. He said he's not going to get vaccinated, which is not a surprise to anybody. But it does mean that when he travels to New York and then what was the other state?
San Francisco.
Yes, those are games he's going to miss. I also think that as the year goes on, the NBA or individual teams or even states might begin to also have mandates. So this might change. We might, through the season, it maybe, I was going to say Florida. Florida's not doing this. maybe there's some other states that are going to do this as well. And it's going to prohibit him from playing in big games where they really need him. Let's say it goes statewide in California. Okay, So not only is this happening now with the Warriors, it's the Lakers and Clippers. So that'll be fascinating. If everything holds and stays the same, this means that in the playoffs, like a Kyrie, for example, would not be able to play in the games where he has home court advantage. I just do not see this staying the same the rest of the year. I don't know what's going to change, though. But yes, the Nuggets are very interesting to me. They do have that issue, though. They have the Michael Porter Jr. issue.
What's your feel on another kind of polarizing team, the Utah Jazz? I kind of chided them a little bit in being a cute 1 seed, and yes, that was intentional. And then, unfortunately, I mean, I don't root against any team, really. I'm a lover, not a hater. I want to see everyone do well, but there's only one champion at the end of the year, of course. Do you think the Jazz are on their way down? I mean, it's interesting. You have a different mix of players now, but you also have Donovan Mitchell on the rise. Still a very young, very awesome, talented, capable player from Louisville. What's your feel for that team and where they're going?
Well, if they do any better, it means that he's taken an enormous personal leap. Because I think right now, just the way the team is structured with Rudy and let's say Donovan stays the same, I think it's gone as far as it can go, which is great. I mean, they're going to the playoffs, but I don't think that push is going to happen unless he has an incredible year personally, which has been the story really for his entire time in the NBA, right? It's been his personal improvement has led the team. With the first year where he came in and he was like, forget Gordon, I'm here. And he really shocked everybody. And his personal triumphs have been Utah's triumphs. So I think unless he has an incredible year, they're going to stay pretty stagnant, if not regress.
Mm-hmm. Well, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, one last question. What would be your ideal, like what you're rooting for a Final Four for the NBA playoffs way down the road from now? What do you think would be best? You can take this any way you want it. What would you like to see for a Final Four this year?
I want the Nuggets in there. And I think the Lakers as well, because there's a lot of interesting matchups. You have to say the Nets. Like I said earlier, you never want to miss a chance to see KD in the playoffs.
It was good last year, even limping through the finish line.
I mean, he's incredible. That's the thing is every time he has a great game, it's, because he has caused a lot of controversy in his career, warranted or not. There's a lot of people who don't like him. And every time he has one of those games, on Twitter, it's always the narrative's the same. It's like, well, you guys can't say anything. There's nothing you can say about this guy. So I would not want to miss him in the playoffs. And I really enjoyed watching the Bucks last year. I think the Bucks are a fun team to watch. I like watching Giannis do well. I think he's just a nice person to root for. But if we're going larger playoffs, I think the Hornets are on to something special. I just hope they can build that momentum. This has nothing to do with the Final Four because they're not going that far. I don't think so. But yeah, the Hornets, I'm trying to think on the West who I'd really want to see do well. Well, actually, you know what? I want to see the Suns continue and build on what they've already got. That's actually what I'm interested in as well. You asked about storylines earlier, Justin.
Yeah.
Where does Devin Booker take it from here? Can he use what Chris Paul has given him by being his wingman and elevate further? Because that's really changed his career. The trajectory of his career has been Chris Paul being there alongside him. So I'm interested to see how Devin Booker grows.
Haley, this has been awesome. Thank you for taking some time out of your Thursday to chat with us. Please let our viewers and listeners know where they can find you on social media, where they can find the Spinsters podcast, and anything else you have coming up for the rest of the year as well.
You can find Spinsters on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And we also have a Twitter account at SpinstersBW. And I'm on Twitter at HaleyOsomething.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley, for joining us. Really appreciate the chat.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Justin.